Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the 133rd episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. As always, I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie Betts. And today I have just some reflections from a conference that I just got back from yesterday. I think I did an episode like this last year, but this was actually my fourth time that I've attended a conference called R.O.C.K, which is an acronym for Research on Calculus Kinetics. So it's the R.O.C.K Society. And it's truly, essentially one of very few, if not the only exclusive conference related to kidney stones. And it really is very unique in that it's very small and it is this society. So you technically have to be like invited to go, but it really is more of a research conference. So really not meant to be sort of like educating the masses, but more it is truly the top kidney stone researchers, both from a sort of prevention standpoint, as well as urology, surgical, stone removal, right? All things kidney stone care, basically. So truly a research conference where people all over the country and world come together and share the research that they're working on to, both, share it with the group as well as get feedback and help us, everyone sort of helps improve the research and, having those different conversations and that sort of thing. And it really is so much fun. And I feel so fortunate that I am able to go every year because it's fascinating, personally. And also I get to see many of the, my old colleagues from the University of Chicago. If you don't know, I sort of fell in love with stones at the University of Chicago when I was fortunate enough to work with truly some of the top world-renowned kidney stone doctors that learned from them. And that University of Chicago was actually the first kidney stone clinic ever, way back when. So anyway, I just really miss academic medicine. That is where I spent most of my career so far, and really miss being in that research academic world. And so I really, really appreciate the opportunity to at least have a weekend back in that world. And really, it's such an excellent opportunity for me to stay up to date with truly the cutting edge, what's happening now in kidney stone research. And as you know, evidence and data and research is unbelievably important to me as the kidney dietitian, and I take great care that everything that I share with you, whether it be a Instagram reel or a blog post, or of course my courses, Kidney Stone Nutrition School, all of that reflects truly the most up-to-date kidney stone research. And so to do that, I have to stay, right? I have to know what's going on. So anyway, I had a wonderful time. The conference was in Nashville this weekend, which I also love because I love Nashville. And it's pretty close for me. I live in Chicago. So it was a great weekend. And many people will, periodically I'll get questions of what's going on in kidney stone research? What are some of the innovations? And so I thought it might be fun to dedicate an episode to sort of a huge list of things that I learned, and just to kind of give you a taste of the types of research that is going on in kidney stone world right now. So let's go ahead and dive in. So some of the general themes that were there were urology things, which is interesting, but not really my cup of tea, right? Like how I said, there's really, the way that I see it, really are two totally different pieces of kidney stone care. One of those pieces is kidney stone prevention, which is where I come in as a dietitian, right? Like there's a ton that we can do with food to prevent stones, but there's also equally important the urology piece, which really is more focused on kidney stone monitoring, monitoring with your stones in your body with imaging, right, with those x-rays and ultrasounds and CT scans that you get, really monitoring, has your stone grown, has it moved, how big is it, right, all these types of things, as well as stone surgery, right, both very important. And so there was a ton of, and both of these sort of pieces of kidney stone care are present at the R.O.C. conference. So with the urology stuff, there is all sorts of stuff with innovations for stone surgery itself. So looking at the technology of the different lasers that they use for lithotripsy and different suctions and all sorts of stuff that I honestly don't understand because I am not a kidney stone surgeon. But things to make your surgery less risky with those different lasers and different ways of doing things, maybe making the surgery shorter, different ways for your surgeon to see better as they're doing the surgery, potentially ways and insights into making stents more comfortable for you, because I know as a patient with kidney stones, right? So of course, stents are notoriously terrible and not very fun. And so there's always many sessions on stents and ways that we can help make that better from all sorts of different angles. There was also many sessions on sort of very basic science regarding the very detailed details of how kidney stones actually form, truly at that molecular level. Again, this is kind of going above and beyond my wheelhouse, and people that are way smarter than me do this types of things. But it's super important, right, for us to understand as much as we can about how exactly stones form, where they form, why they form, all the different factors that go into stones forming or not, because it really turns out quite complicated, like many things in science, right? So exactly how, like where on the, looking at the shape of the crystals of the stone, where the next one attaches, looking at how bacteria might play into this whole thing, looking at what other molecules are there that are inhibiting or promoting stone formation. So, obviously we know about the big ones, right? Like calcium monoxide or calcium phosphate, or uric acid, or whatever it is, but there's hundreds of different compounds in a stone, right? And of course they can all potentially be things that we can think about for preventing stones, right? That's the point of understanding this, is then hopefully we can grow that knowledge to, as we understand it better, maybe come up with novel new ways to help us prevent stones, right? That's always the goal. There was a super interesting session about potential new binders that you might take. So essentially like a medication that you might take to reduce the absorption of oxalate. So sort of like we talk about with calcium, but it would be way more a stronger binder than calcium. So some interesting research going on there. And also, as always, like in all areas of medicine, ton of interesting stuff on genetics. Again, this stuff tends to be a bit over my head, I will admit. But like, really looking at the specific genes and mutations and, different things that are related to stones, because there's like tons of different genes that have been associated with increased stone risk, and sort of really understanding that, because of course, just like the basic science of how stones form, the more we understand that, potentially there's different ways that we could be better at preventing stones, right? There was also many topics that were very interesting to me as a dietitian, right, who's out here trying to help everyone with kidney stones live a little bit a better life and prevent stones with food. Definitely one of my favorite sessions was a session that showed that improvements to 24-hour urine tests, which how passionate I am about those if you've been around here for even 5 minutes, but really showing that improvements in 24-hour urine tests were correlated with people passing less stones. So that's wonderful, right? Because one of the things that's so difficult about kidney stone research and prevention in general is that stones form over such long periods of time, and they can form and we have no idea that they're there, right? Like stones can be there for years and you may never even know they're there if you happen to get scanned. They could be there for years and just hanging out. You might not know that they're there, and then they pass years later, right? Which makes it really, really hard to know if what we're doing is working, and also really hard to know why you formed a stone, because it could have happened literally decades ago, right? So it's an extra level of challenge, certainly, in kidney stone research. And so that is why, among many reasons, we have these 24-hour urine tests, that we use them both clinically as you, right? You go get your urine test, and that can help us direct kidney stone prevention for you to make it as effective for you as possible. But we also use them in research, because even in research settings, we don't have all the money in the world to be scanning people for kidney stones all the time, and right, we don't always know exactly what's going on. So we use 24-hour urine tests as a marker to see if things are working, right? If our treatments are working, and it's always good to see more research that shows that when the 24-hour urine test gets better, there's a lower risk of stones, right? Because admittedly, that's a jump, right? Like there's a difference between numbers looking better on that piece of paper and not forming a stone, and there's more and more data coming out that when those numbers look better on paper, you make less stones, right? So there was a great session basically really showing that some specific improvements in that urine test did correlate with people passing less stones, with people coming to the ER less and passing less stones. So that was really cool. There was also a fascinating session about kidney stones and astronauts, which is pretty cool. Not cool. I mean, not great that they're getting kidney stones, but just fascinating to think about, how all the different sort of challenges and honestly insights that we can learn from space research. But it's been known for a long time that astronauts are at a higher risk of kidney stones, and that's always been sort of assumed to be related to higher levels of calcium in their urine. So we know that, a huge issue for astronauts is that they experience bone breakdown at higher rates when they're in space because they don't have any they aren't using their muscles, right? Like, we know that the more you use your muscles, that's why we recommend sort of resistance training for bone health, right? The more your muscles are working and they're pulling on the bones, and apparently that pulling on the bones really helps bones be healthy. But in space, without gravity, you aren't using your muscles obviously nearly as much because you're not even using them to stand up, right? Or walk around. And so, unfortunately, astronauts do experience that bone breakdown. But as a result of that bone breakdown, that calcium needs to go somewhere, right? And that calcium, unfortunately, ends up in your urine, which increases the risk of stones. So we've known that is happening for quite some time. But this particular presentation was about the potential impact on oxalate and how oxalate might be playing into this increased risk of stones in astronauts as well. So that was really interesting. There's also a fascinating session about meditation. So they found that patients who had some sort of guided meditation before they had a stone surgery actually had self-reported improvements in both physical and emotional health after their surgery. So I thought that was fascinating and really cool. We certainly sort of intuitively know that brain connection and mental health connection to actual like physical health, not actual health, of course, mental health is real health, but you know what I mean? Like, that there's that connection. And, whenever you see studies that show that taking, some sort of improvement in mental health or taking efforts to improve mental health results in physical health, that's always just kind of fascinating to me. So I thought that was cool that meditation really did help people cope both emotionally and physically after stone surgery. So something you might want to think about. There was also an interesting session about using AI for basically looking at, did ChatGPT and other AI tools give accurate information for patients, like for kidney stone information, right? So if we ask ChatGPT, what do I have to eat for kidney stones, right? Is it accurate, right? And they had a whole bunch of different questions. They weren't necessarily related to nutrition, but they were related to kidney stones in general. And they found that it actually did a pretty good job, and they found that it actually did a little bit better over time. However, when things got a little bit, when the questions, there was some discussion about how when questions get a little bit more specific, like if you ask, like, I have a kidney stone, what should I do? Sort of a really general question, it does a pretty good job. But when you start getting more specific, like perhaps exactly how much sodium should I eat, or I have this type of stone, or I have this urine risk factor, or I'm also managing all these things, then it didn't do quite as good of a job, which kind of makes sense, but certainly interesting to think about. And there was also a fascinating session about some new rare stone types that they've identified. We know that, the vast majority of stones, we know, I'm going to guess like 98% of the stones that are formed, we know what kind of stone they are, right? We know that about 75% of stones are made of calcium oxalate. We know that maybe 8-ish% are calcium phosphate. Also maybe 8-ish% are uric acid, and we know struvite, right? We know kind of these main, and cysteine also, right? We know these kind of big stone types, but the labs, the one huge lab that does a lot of both the urine and kidney stone testing is called Litholink. I've certainly talked about it before, and they, are analyzing thousands of stones. over time because people are sending them stones to analyze from all over the place, and they are able to identify the vast majority of the substances. However, apparently there are some stones that come in, very rare, but that come in that they don't know what it is, right? The lab hasn't seen this substance before. And so there's some interesting insights into some new rare stone types. And I thought it was interesting to share that one of those is something called a substance called urolithin A. And so the stone is actually made out of that urolithin A. And you can get urolithin A from a variety of reasons. You can actually take it as a supplement. It's apparently a supplement that people are taking. So I think there is certainly concern that these urolithin A supplements might be causing stones. And this is a very small number of people, but still, something to think about. And also, apparently, urolithin A is, depending on your gut microbiome, some people can convert polyphenols, which are in lots of really, really healthy foods, most notably walnuts, the specific type of polyphenol that's found in walnuts. If you have a specific gut microbiome, you can actually convert that polyphenol to urolithin A, and that can cause stones. So crazy, so many things to think about, right? I don't know, maybe I'm just a nerd, but I think this stuff is fascinating. I do like to point out that the people who were forming these urolithin A stones as a result of walnuts were consuming insanely large amounts of walnuts. So just like the oxalate story, right? I talk all the time how, I don't love low oxalate diets for a whole number of reasons because oxalate comes in really healthy foods. But when we start to consume these massively in large amounts of things, which is one of the reasons I hate that we have these sort of superfoods, or we're sort of we love to categorize things and try to make it black and white and say this is really good. Well, yeah, if you eat a ton of spinach, right? If you eat a giant spinach smoothie every day and you have a giant spinach salad, and it's especially if it's not in the context of a healthy, well-balanced diet without adequate calcium, yes, we do see people get into trouble, right? But if you're eating spinach as, occasionally with lots of other healthy fruits and vegetables, and you're getting in a balanced diet with enough calcium, 99.9% of people are going to be totally fine with that, So I feel like this is a similar thing. Yes, perhaps walnuts do contain this particular polyphenol, which has benefits. I'm going to throw out polyphenols are wonderful. They're antioxidants and can help prevent cancer and all sorts of great stuff. They're good for your heart, blah, 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 right? But if in people who are consuming large amounts of them, bags of walnuts a day, and they had this specific microbiome composition, it could potentially convert to this urolithin A and cause stones. So, as always, just good to eat a wide variety of things. I see this as another win for variety and eating a variety of different kinds of nuts and different types of fiber and plant proteins and all that stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure I didn't put anything out there that was demonizing walnuts. And also, interestingly, there was a new different type of stone that is associated with eating large amounts, bags, giant food service size or Costco size bags of Splenda. So I think Splenda, totally fine. I think it's a great sweetener, but like all things, we shouldn't want to be eating cups of it, right? And apparently if you do, there is a different type of stone that could form potentially. So fascinating stuff, really, really fascinating stuff. There was also some interesting sessions sort of on the financial side of things, because research is important from, there's so many different types of research out there, and is lots of research that's looking at the financial impact of patients in kidney stones and other health conditions, right? So there was some sessions on the financial impact specifically on a condition called cystinuria, which is a rare genetic condition that increases the risk of stones. They make these cystine stones. So kind of looking at the financial impact of that metabolic condition. Also a study looking at the wait times that Medicaid patients specifically face for kidney stone appointments. And they unsurprisingly found that Medicaid patients did on average have to wait longer than people who had private insurance. So that's not great. And also there was a potential implication for how this is going to be worse as a result of the Big Beautiful Bill, which is of course going to make healthcare much more expensive, and also reduce Medicaid coverage, perhaps leading to more places not taking it, right? All these things. So these basically really highlighting how these patients really are already vulnerable and likely are going to become more vulnerable over the next handful of years. Also, some interesting research looking at really diving into all of the NIH funding cuts when it comes to research. There's a proposed 40% cut to NIH research funding, as well as some very significant reorganization and consolidation of lots of different branches, essentially, and departments within the NIH, and sort of really diving into the nitty-gritty of all of those reorganizations and budget cuts and how those things are likely going to have a huge impact on the amount of funding that kidney stone research gets, which means that all of this really cool stuff that I've been talking about and will continue to talk about in this podcast, a lot of this research, isn't going to be is in danger of not being able to be continued, or we're not able to grow on this knowledge to be able to build this research and understand it better to bring it to the point where we can actually make real, meaningful recommendations to patients and doctors to help improve the care of people with kidney stones, to help prevent kidney stones. So that's a little depressing, but is the reality of the world that we live in. And so there was a session about that as well. Lastly, I wanted to end on a happy note. There was a lot of sessions about the gut microbiome, which is always my very favorite topic. If you haven't already, definitely go back and listen to my podcast episode with Aaron Miller. He has a lab at Cleveland Clinic and does a ton of microbiome research, specifically around oxalate, metabolism, and degradation, all microbiome stuff. And it's a fascinating episode, and he was there again, and it was fun to connect with him again. But he presented some interesting research that really showed that there are bacteria both in your intestines as well as in your urine that produce oxalate, right? We always historically sort of assumed that the connection between the gut microbiome and oxalate metabolism is that there are many bacteria that live in our intestine that eat oxalate, that degrade oxalate, they use it for energy, which is great for us as humans, right? Because then that oxalate isn't available to be absorbed into your system and eventually make kidney stones. Or, that oxalate bacteria, degrading bacteria, I suppose, could also be in your urine, and it could actually be eating up the oxalate in your urine, which is really cool too. So we know that exists, but there's new research that shows that there are certain microbes that actually produce oxalate themselves. So really just kind of, which is fascinating, and really just kind of highlighting the even more complexity that the gut microbiome is, and it's just so fascinating. I love it. It's one of my favorite topics. There was also some really interesting research looking at supplementing inulin, which is a specific kind of fiber that is a fiber that's really known to help the gut microbiome grow, right? So the best thing from a high level that we can do to help support a quote healthy gut microbiome is eat a lot of fiber, because bacteria eat that fiber. That's one of the reasons fiber is so good for us, one of many. But one of the biggest reasons I think that it's good for us is that it helps feed those bacteria, and then those bacteria can live and grow and multiply and do all the amazing things that they do for us. And inulin is a specific fiber that is especially good at doing that, essentially. And we know that one of the things that all these bacteria do for us is produce something called short chain fatty acids, which are associated with all sorts of really great things, improved gut health, reduced inflammation, sort of systemically, like across your whole body, and all sorts of cool stuff. But there is a trial specifically looking at inulin supplementation in dogs with kidney stones. Another fascinating thing about R.O.C.K is that there is always some veterinarians there, because kidney stones are a huge problem for cats and dogs as well as humans, turns out. And so it's really cool that the different fields are collaborating and learning from each other, because obviously we can learn things, they can help their pets better, and we can help humans better by learning from each other. So cool. But anyway, so this trial is looking at inulin supplementation in dogs and looking at that short chain fatty acid production as a result of that inulin supplementation, which is in theory helping that gut microbiome grow and proliferate and do great stuff. But then looking at how that could potentially reduce oxalate intestinal absorption and sort of understanding if inulin can help reduce kidney stones, essentially, right? If this specific prebiotic supplement can help reduce kidney stones. And the assumption is that it probably can, because it can do all these different things that can can lower our risk of calcium oxalate stones. Hopefully that made sense. I feel like I was a little choppy there. But basically, one of the things that it likely can do is reduce sort of the direct intestinal absorption of oxalate, because short chain fatty acids can basically make your gut less leaky, if you will, and help it function better, and not let stuff that we don't necessarily want including oxalate. So that's potentially one way it could help. It likely will reduce inflammation. We know very well that short chain fatty acids reduce inflammation both in the gut as well as in the kidneys. So potentially supplementing inulin could help reduce inflammation, therefore reducing stones in that mechanism. Also just like changing the gut microbiome overall, potentially seeing changes in calcium metabolism and homeostasis and like that sort of thing. So like all sorts of really cool stuff that I find fascinating. And also, lastly, this has been a long episode. I hope that you found it interesting, but I'm just so excited. Like I said, I learned so many things and I just wanted to share it with you. The last thing that I found fascinating is that they're actually doing a fecal transplant trial for calcium oxalate stone formers. So again, we know very clearly that there's this huge connection to the gut microbiome and stones. And one way that we can potentially change the gut microbiome for the better, whether it's stones or anything, is fecal transplants. So yes, you heard me correctly. So literally taking a small sample of poop from a presumably, quote, better gut microbiome and putting it into someone who doesn't have the best microbiome and hopefully seeing improvement in their health, right? So they're actually doing some research looking at that for calcium oxalate stone formers to see if we can make things better. So fascinating stuff, right? Again, I'm biased. This is my world, but I don't know. It's so cool. And so I hope that was interesting. I'm kind of getting just a taste of the types of research that are going on to help make your life as someone living with kidney stones better. And I also just wanted to say that, hopefully this really does give you a taste. Like there's so many different kinds of research going on. It really is fascinating. And that is why it's so important to me that I do give lifetime access to my Kidney Stone Nutrition School students, because I do update it, right? I am incredibly passionate about staying as up to date as possible in kidney stone research. And that's why I spend my time going to conferences like this and learning and, doing very intense like literature searches every single month to stay up to date with what's going on, because there really is so much going on. And so why it's so important that I update Kidney Stone Nutrition School, and I do periodically when these, when research gets to the point where we actually can change our recommendations. And so I update Kidney Stone Nutrition School with all this information, and really, it really is so important to me. So just wanted to end with that. So, again, I hope this was interesting, and you could follow along. There was a lot of information in this episode, but I'm just so excited. I really wanted to share it with you. So, as always, if you have any questions specifically that you would like me to answer on the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast, I'd love to hear from you. You can head to kidneystonepodcast.com to record a question for a chance to get answered on the podcast, and have a lovely week, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.